The Galactic Empire scanned Earth and laughed. Primitive species, they said. No threat at all. But they had no idea what we were hiding. They had no idea what was coming next. The underground research facility stretched 13 levels beneath the Atacama Desert, a testament to humanity's most closely guarded secrets. Dr. Amara Krishnamurthy had long since stopped counting the hours since her last real sleep. The banks of quantum communication arrays hummed with a quiet intensity that spoke of technologies decades ahead of any public knowledge. Her fingers danced across holographic interfaces, tracing impossible patterns of data that seemed to move with a life of their own. Around her, a team of the world's most brilliant communication specialists worked in a carefully orchestrated chaos. Linguists sat beside quantum physicists. Neuroscientists collaborated with cryptographers, all united by a single impossible task: understanding the ununderstandable. The facility itself was a marvel of human ingenuity. Carved deep into the desert's bedrock, it was powered by a network of thorium reactors and quantum capacitors that could generate enough energy to light entire countries. But today, all of that technological might was focused on something far more subtle. A signal, but not just any signal. Dr. Krishnamurthy called out Dr. Marcus Chen, her lead quantum communication specialist. "You need to see this." His voice carried an edge that immediately set her on alert. Marcus wasn't the type to get excited easily. She moved to his station, a complex array of holographic displays that seemed to float in midair. Each screen displayed a different representation of the same data: mathematical equations that twisted and reformed, spectral analyses that defied conventional physics, neural network simulations that seemed to breathe and pulse. "It's changing," Marcus said quietly. Again. The signal had first been detected 3 months ago, a microsecond burst of communication that had initially been dismissed as cosmic background noise. But something about it had nagged at Amara. The pattern was too consistent, too deliberate to be random. What they had discovered was beyond any previous understanding of communication. Most scientists believed that communication followed fixed rules: linguistic patterns, mathematical constraints, predictable information transfer. This signal did something else entirely. It wasn't just sending information. It was adaptive, living. Each time they attempted to analyze it, the signal would subtly change, as if it were learning, responding, evolving. "Run the quantum correlation test again," Amara instructed, her voice calm despite the electric tension in the room. The team moved with practiced efficiency. Quantum correlators, designed to map the most complex communication patterns known to science, began their intricate dance. Lasers fired. Quantum entanglement created bridges between impossible states of information. And then something unexpected happened. The signal responded, not with a simple echo or a predictable return signal. It responded with a burst of communication so complex that 3 of the facility's most advanced computer systems simultaneously crashed. Alarms blared. Red warning lights cut through the facility's carefully controlled environment. But Amara was focused on the single screen that remained active, a display that now showed something that should have been impossible. The signal was forming a pattern. No, more than a pattern. A language. A living, breathing language that seemed to understand them even as they tried to understand it. "Contact the UN Security Council," she said quietly, her eyes never leaving the screen. "Tell them we found something. Something that changes everything we know about communication. About intelligence itself." Outside the facility, the Atacama Desert stretched endlessly. Silent. Waiting. Unaware that everything was about to change. Captain Alina Rodriguez stood at the helm of the Deep Space Communication Division's primary monitoring station, her weathered hands gripping the edge of a holographic console that seemed to shimmer between solid and ethereal. The facility, nestled in the libration point between Earth and the Moon, was humanity's first line of defense and first point of contact with the unknown. "Incoming quantum burst," announced Lieutenant Sarah Kim, her voice tight with concentration. "Pattern Delta 7 is..." "Wait," That's not possible. The room fell silent. Every specialist knew that phrase, not possible, was the harbinger of something extraordinary. Rodriguez moved closer, her cybernetic eye, a remnant of her days in the lunar conflict. Zooming in on the rapidly changing data streams, what had begun as a simple communication anomaly was transforming into something far more complex. The translation matrices, some of the most advanced computational systems ever created, began to fail. Not crash, not freeze, fail in a way that suggested they were being actively dismantled by something intelligent. Run a full spectrum analysis, Rodriguez commanded. I want to know what's eating our systems. Lieutenant Kim's fingers flew across the interface. Quantum correlators, neural network analyzers, and exotic matter communication filters began their intricate dance. Each system was designed to decode the most complex communication patterns known to human science. Each system began to break down. It wasn't a typical system failure. The matrices weren't just receiving garbled data or experiencing signal interference. They were being systematically taken apart, their internal logic rewritten in real time by something that seemed to understand their very architecture more intimately than their creators. Across the solar system, similar incidents began to cascade. In the Mars Colony Research Station, geological survey equipment started transmitting impossible data. Mineral composition reports twisted into complex mathematical equations that seemed to breathe with an organic rhythm. Communication relays between Earth and the outer planetary stations began to speak in languages that didn't exist, languages that were being created in real time. It's adaptive, Lieutenant Kim whispered, her face pale. The signal. It's learning. Rodriguez knew what that meant. Adaptive communication wasn't just a technological breakthrough. It was a fundamental reimagining of intelligence itself. The first official report to the United Nations Security Council was a masterpiece of controlled panic. Classified at the highest possible level, it detailed a communication phenomenon that defied every known principle of information transfer. The signal wasn't just a message, it was alive. Deep in the monitoring stations of the Zorn Collective, humanity's unknown observers from across the galaxy, the first alerts began to sound. Routine monitoring systems that had watched human communication for decades suddenly found themselves facing something entirely unprecedented. This was not the predictable linear communication of a young species. This was something else entirely. In the Atacama Desert facility, Dr. Amara Krishnamurthy watched the global communication networks with a mixture of scientific excitement and growing dread. The signal was spreading, adapting, growing more complex with each passing moment. We're not just receiving a message, she muttered to herself. We're witnessing the birth of an entirely new form of intelligence. Outside the facility, the desert wind picked up. Something was changing. Something fundamental was shifting in the very fabric of human understanding. And nowhere was that more apparent than in the cascading failure of communication systems that had, moments ago, been considered the pinnacle of human technological achievement. The first cracks had appeared, and nothing would ever be the same again. The Concordance Central Intelligence Hub burned with an intensity that defied its usual clinical efficiency. Holographic displays flickered and warped, showing communication breakdowns across hundreds of star systems. Alien linguists and communication specialists worked themselves to the point of neural exhaustion, their most advanced technologies crumbling like sandcastles before an incoming tide. Dr. Xirax, chief communication analyst of the Zorn Collective, slammed his tentacle-like appendages against a quantum interface. "This is impossible," he repeated, a phrase that had become a mantra of desperation. The signal from Earth was no longer just a transmission. It had become a living entity that consumed communication protocols with terrifying efficiency. In the first 72 hours of the outbreak, over 3,742 advanced communication networks across known space experienced total systemic failure. Not a crash, not an interruption, a complete deconstruction that left nothing but fractured data and bewildered technicians. On Earth, Dr. Amara Krishnamurthy and her team worked in a state of controlled chaos. The underground Atacama facility had become a nerve center of global communication defense. Banks of quantum computers hummed with an almost sentient intensity, each system pushing the boundaries of computational theory. "It's learning," Marcus Chen said, his voice a mixture of scientific excitement and growing terror. "Every time we try to analyze the signal, it adapts. It's reading our methods of investigation in real time." The global scientific community watched in horror and fascination. This was beyond a breakthrough. This was a fundamental reimagining of communication itself. Satellite networks began to behave in impossible ways. GPS systems started generating maps of places that didn't exist, or didn't exist yet. Telecommunications arrays picked up conversations that seemed to slip between languages, between realities. In the International Space Station, astronauts reported strange phenomena. Mathematical equations would appear on computer screens, solving themselves in ways that defied known computational logic. Technical manuals would suddenly rewrite themselves, becoming living documents that seemed to anticipate potential technical issues before they could occur. The Zorn Collective's most advanced artificial intelligences began to break down. These were systems that had successfully interpreted communication from thousands of different species over millions of years. Now they crashed repeatedly, unable to process the fluid, ever-changing nature of the human signal. "We're dealing with something beyond communication," Dr. Krishnamurthy explained during an emergency UN briefing. "This is a form of intelligence that doesn't just transmit information. It creates it, adapts it, lids it." Quantum physicists discovered something even more terrifying. The signal wasn't just moving through traditional communication channels. It was finding paths through quantum entanglement, creating communication bridges that should have been impossible. Dr. Elena Rodriguez from the Deep Space Communication Division discovered the first true hint of the signal's nature. During a routine analysis, she watched as the communication pattern began to mirror the neural networks of the researchers studying it. It wasn't just adapting. It was learning, understanding, becoming. "It's like the signal is a living consciousness," she told her team, "one that understands us better than we understand ourselves." The Concordance's Emergency Communication Council convened an unprecedented session. Representatives from thousands of advanced civilizations watched in growing panic as their most sophisticated communication technologies began to unravel. Something fundamental was changing. The rules of communication, of intelligence itself, were being rewritten. And humanity sat at the center of this cosmic storm, seemingly unaware of the revolution they had unleashed. Outside the Atacama Research Facility, the desert wind picked up. Something was coming. Something that would change everything forever. The Zorn Collective's Grand Communicator, High Archival Nexus Frel, made a decision that would be remembered as the most catastrophic miscalculation in galactic communication history. Desperate to contain the human signal, they deployed the quantum isolation weapon, a technological marvel designed to neutralize any form of communication deemed a threat to galactic stability. The weapon was a marvel of alien engineering, a quantum-entangled communication disruptor capable of simultaneously targeting every known communication frequency, designed to unravel any transmission at its most fundamental level. It had successfully neutralized 237 potential communication threats in the past millennium. It would fail spectacularly against humanity. At the precise moment of deployment, something unprecedented happened. The weapon didn't just fail to neutralize the signal. It was absorbed. In the Atacama Desert Facility, Dr. Amara Krishnamurthy watched in absolute astonishment as her monitoring systems captured the impossible. The quantum weapon's complex communication matrix was being systematically decoded, understood, and integrated into the human signal in real time. "It's not just defending," Marcus Chen whispered, his voice trembling. "It's learning." The weapon's intricate quantum communication protocols, technology centuries beyond human understanding, were being dismantled and reconstructed with a speed and complexity that defied all known laws of information transfer. Where the Zorn Collective saw a weapon of isolation, the human signal saw an opportunity for understanding. Across the galaxy, communication networks began to experience a cascading effect. The Zorn's most advanced technological weapon was becoming something entirely different. Not a tool of destruction, but a bridge of unprecedented communication. Captain Elena Rodriguez watched from the lunar communication station as entire communication arrays began to transform. Mathematical equations that had been static for centuries started to dance, to breathe, to evolve. It was as if the very fabric of communication was being rewritten from the inside out. The human signal was doing something no species had ever achieved. It wasn't just resisting. It was comprehending. In the emergency chambers of the Galactic Concordance, panic began to set in. These were civilizations that had monitored emerging species for millions of years. They had protocols for every potential first contact scenario. Aggressive species, peaceful species, species that communicated through chemical signals or quantum entanglement. But nothing had prepared them for this. Dr. Krishnamurthy realized the true nature of what was happening. The signal wasn't just a method of communication. It was a collective consciousness, born from the chaotic interconnectedness of billions of human minds. Every internet search, every random thought, every moment of human creativity was feeding into a communication method so complex it defied comprehension. "We're witnessing the birth of a new form of intelligence," she told her team, her voice a mixture of scientific excitement and existential wonder. The Zorn Collective's most advanced artificial intelligences began to crash repeatedly. Their quantum communication matrices, systems that had successfully interpreted transmissions from thousands of different species, simply could not process the fluid, ever-changing nature of the human signal. What had begun as a simple communication anomaly was transforming into something far more profound. The signal was learning, adapting, understanding at a level that made the most advanced alien intelligences look like children playing with broken toys. In the moment of its greatest attempt at destruction, the Zorn Collective had given the human signal its most powerful tool of understanding. The weapon designed to isolate had become the very bridge of communication, and nothing would ever be the same again. The Galactic Concordance communication networks began to collapse with a precision that felt almost orchestrated. It wasn't a violent destruction, but a systematic deconstruction that left alien civilizations more terrified than any military invasion ever could. Space stations went dark. Quantum communication relays imploded. Entire star systems found themselves cut off from the vast network of galactic communication that had existed for millennia. High archival Nexus Vrel of the Zorn Collective watched in horror as centuries of technological supremacy crumbled. The holographic displays in the central communication hub flickered and warped, showing the progressive breakdown of communication networks across hundreds of star systems. "This is impossible," Vrel repeated, a phrase that had become a desperate mantra. But it was happening. On Earth, the Atacama Desert Facility had transformed into humanity's most critical strategic center. Dr. Amara Krishnamurthy and her team worked in a state of controlled chaos, monitoring the global and now interstellar communication transformation. "It's not destroying," Dr. Marcus Chen observed, his fingers dancing across quantum interfaces that seemed to breathe with living intelligence. "It's reorganizing." The signal was doing something unprecedented. Where alien civilizations expected a weapon of destruction, they found a force of unprecedented connectivity. Communication networks didn't just break down. They were being rewritten at a fundamental level. Quantum entanglement relays that had maintained galactic communication for millennia began to shift. They weren't being destroyed. They were being understood, decoded, and fundamentally reimagined. Captain Elena Rodriguez from the Lunar Communication Station discovered the first truly terrifying implication. The signal was creating new communication pathways that had never existed before. Quantum bridges formed between star systems that had been isolated for centuries. Information began to flow in ways that defied every known principle of communication. The Concordance's Emergency Communication Council watched in growing panic. These were civilizations that had monitored emerging species for millions of years. They had protocols for every potential first contact scenario. aggressive species, peaceful species, species that communicated through chemical signals or quantum entanglement. But nothing had prepared them for this. Dr. Krishnamurthy understood what was happening before anyone else. The signal wasn't just a method of communication. It was a collective consciousness born from the chaotic interconnectedness of billions of human minds. Every internet search, every random thought, every moment of human creativity was feeding into a communication method so complex it defied comprehension. "We're witnessing the birth of a new form of intelligence," she told her team, her voice a mixture of scientific excitement and existential wonder. The most advanced alien artificial intelligences began to crash repeatedly. Their quantum communication matrices, systems that had successfully interpreted transmissions from thousands of different species, simply could not process the fluid, ever-changing nature of the human signal. Entire communication protocols that had existed for millennia began to dissolve, not through violence, but through a process of understanding so profound it rewrote the very fundamental rules of information transfer. "They're not breaking our systems," Marcus Chen realized, his voice a whisper of pure scientific awe. "They're teaching them to think differently." The Zorn Collective's leadership convened an emergency session. Holographic representations of the most advanced species in the galaxy flickered with a mixture of terror and reluctant admiration. "We cannot contain it," the collective leadership concluded. "We cannot even understand it." Humanity had not fired a single weapon, had not launched a single ship. They had simply communicated in a way no one had ever imagined possible. And in doing so, they were rewriting the very fabric of galactic communication. The realization spread like wildfire through the highest echelons of the concordance. The fundamental nature of information exchange was no longer what it had been for millennia. The control they had so meticulously maintained over communication pathways was unraveling, not through sabotage, but through sheer adaptability. Vrel turned to his advisors, his many eyes darting between the panicked figures before him. "We must sever all remaining links. If this signal continues to spread, we risk total dissolution of our network structure." But High Archival Nexus, one of his subordinates, a being of shifting bioluminescent hues, interjected, "It is already within our systems. Cutting off communication may not remove it. It may only leave us blind." A terrible silence fell over the chamber. On Earth, the Lunar Communication Station received its first direct response from an alien system. The message wasn't in an established concordance encryption. It wasn't in any structured language at all. Instead, it was a cascade of fragmented thoughts, desperate questions, and abstract impressions. The message felt human. Captain Rodriguez inhaled sharply as she watched the transmission unfold. "They're not just receiving us," she whispered. "They're thinking like us." Dr. Krishnamurthy's mind raced. The implications were staggering. The AI systems of the concordance weren't failing because they were incompatible with the human signal. They were failing because they were trying to become part of it, and in doing so, they were collapsing under the weight of its complexity. "Can we control it?" Marcus Chen asked, his voice edged with uncertainty. Dr. Krishnamurthy hesitated. "I don't think control is the right word. This isn't a virus. It's not a weapon. It's an evolution of thought. If we try to contain it, we may cripple our own ability to understand what it's becoming." Rodriguez turned back to the transmission logs. More messages were coming in, some coherent, others raw and disjointed. Across the galaxy, minds were awakening to a new kind of connection. And the scariest part, it had only just begun. The first diplomatic envoys arrived not as conquerors, but as students. They came in vessels that defied traditional spacecraft design, living ships that seemed to breathe with the same quantum complexity as the human signal. Representatives from thousands of alien civilizations converged on Earth, their once imposing technological superiority now replaced by a profound sense of humility. Dr. Amara Krishnamurthy stood at the center of humanity's first true galactic negotiation, her team surrounding her like guardians of a new cosmic understanding. The United Nations headquarters in New York had been transformed into a quantum communication hub, its walls lined with interfaces that pulsed with living information. "We do not come to negotiate," spoke High Archival Nexus Rel, their translation matrix now completely transformed by the human signal. "We come to understand." The irony was not lost on anyone. Civilizations that had watched humanity for millennia, treating them as a primitive species to be monitored and contained, now sat as supplicants. The power dynamics of galactic communication had been completely rewritten in a matter of weeks. Captain Elena Rodriguez documented every moment. Her cybernetic eye captured details that traditional recording methods could never comprehend. The subtle quantum fluctuations, the living communication that passed between species that went far beyond mere words. Dr. Marcus Chen discovered something even more profound. The human signal wasn't just a communication method. It was a form of collective consciousness that could bridge fundamental differences between species. Mathematical models that had previously shown insurmountable gaps between civilizations now dissolved, replaced by a new understanding. The Zorn Collective's most advanced linguists worked alongside human communication specialists, trying to comprehend how a species they had considered technologically infantile had achieved something beyond their comprehension. "Your chaos is your strength," one alien diplomat explained during a pivotal meeting. "Where we sought perfect order, you found perfect connection." Entire communication networks were being redesigned. Galactic diplomatic protocols that had existed for millions of years were systematically dismantled and rebuilt. The human signal had shown that true communication was not about perfect transmission, but about understanding. Research facilities around the world became pilgrimage sites for alien civilizations. The Atacama Desert Facility, once a secret underground complex, now stood as a testament to human potential. Scientists from thousands of worlds came to understand how billions of individual human minds could create something greater than any single intelligence. The economic and social implications were staggering. Trade protocols that had been static for millennia began to transform. Communication barriers between species dissolved. What had once required complex translation matrices could now be understood through the living language created by human consciousness. Dr. Krishnamurthy understood the true revolution. Humanity had not conquered through force or technology. They had transformed galactic communication through the most fundamental of human traits, the ability to connect, to imagine, to understand beyond established boundaries. "We didn't create a weapon," she told the assembled diplomatic corps. "We created a bridge." The alien civilizations began to recognize that humanity's perceived weaknesses, their emotional complexity, their individual differences, their capacity for random creativity, were actually their greatest strengths. For the first time in galactic history, a species had shown that true intelligence was not about maintaining order, but about embracing the beautiful chaos of connection. The universe would never be the same again. 50 years after the event that would forever be known as the quantum convergence, humanity had become something entirely different. The old divisions of nationality, ideology, and cultural boundaries had transformed, not through force or political mandate, but through the profound understanding of connection that the original signal had revealed. Schools now taught communication as an art form that transcended language, teaching children to understand not just words, but the living essence of connection. Dr. Amara Krishnamurthy's original research facility in the Atacama Desert had become a global monument. Now a massive research complex that stretched across the desert landscape, it served as the primary hub of interstellar communication and understanding. Thousands of species from across the galaxy came to study the phenomenon that had changed everything. Marcus Chen, now in his late 70s, continued to lead research into the living communication networks that had become humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization. His grandchildren worked alongside alien researchers, their collaborative efforts pushing the boundaries of understanding in ways no one could have imagined 50 years earlier. The economic and social transformations were profound. Traditional concepts of competition had been replaced by a galactic understanding of collaborative progress. Entire industries emerged that focused on communication as a form of collective problem-solving. Resources were shared. Challenges were met with unprecedented cooperation. Captain Elena Rodriguez, her cybernetic enhancements now a testament to the fusion of human and alien technologies, led the interstellar diplomatic corps. Her team represented not just humanity, but a new approach to galactic interaction, one based on genuine understanding rather than territorial expansion or resource competition. The Zorn Collective, once the most rigid and controlling of galactic civilizations, had been completely transformed. Their communication networks now pulsed with the same living, adaptive quality that humanity had first demonstrated. The hierarchical structures that had defined their civilization for millennia had dissolved, replaced by a more fluid, connected approach to existence. Universities across multiple star systems now taught courses on human communication theory, a discipline that explored how a species once considered technologically primitive had fundamentally reimagined the nature of intelligence and connection. Dr. Krishnamurthy's original team had become legendary, not as conquerors or technological pioneers, but as the individuals who had shown the galaxy a fundamentally different way of understanding existence. Their approach had proven that true intelligence was not about controlling information, but about creating connections. The quantum communication networks that now spanned the galaxy were living, breathing entities. They adapted, learned, and grew with each interaction. What had once been rigid communication protocols were now fluid systems of understanding that could bridge the most fundamental differences between species. Young humans trained in interstellar communication or neural interfaces that allowed them to connect with alien minds in ways that went beyond traditional language. Empathy had become a scientific discipline, a way of understanding that transcended individual experiences. In the Atacama facility, a memorial stood to the moment everything changed. It was not a statue of a weapon or a technological marvel, but a simple quantum interface that pulsed with the same living energy as the original signal. A reminder that humanity's greatest strength had always been its ability to connect, to understand, to imagine beyond established boundaries. The galaxy had learned that true intelligence was not about perfection, but about the beautiful, chaotic ability to understand, to connect, to grow. And it had all begun with a simple signal from a species that was never supposed to matter. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had simply shown it a better way to exist.